Hello quilting friends. Well, one of the blocks that we're going to use in making our quilt is the Hourglass block. And for the block that I'm working on, we actually have 3 different fabrics we're using in this Hourglass. I'm going to show you how simple they are to make. So I have prepared my pieces here. I have these 2 fabrics and these 2 fabrics. And then I've drawn a line down the middle with my ruler. So what we'll do then, to make, these are going to first make half square triangles. We're going to sew 1/4 inch from each side of that line. And I like to start with my fabric right up against my needle to get going. Grab my next one here and do the same thing. Okay, and then we're going to run a little scrap through here and clip these apart. And I'm just going to turn them around and do the same thing on the other side of the line. Finish off with a little fabric scrap here and cut them apart, and we're ready for the next step. Okay, now we just need to cut these apart on that line that we drew. So I'll put my ruler here. And then we're ready to take them over and press them. So now we're ready to press our units. What we start with is what's called setting the seam. So I'm just going to set my iron on there for a couple seconds in and flip the piece back and press and hold it for a few seconds just to get it nice and flat. I like to press mine on a towel. It gives a little bit of fluff from the towel, helps the pieces to lay smoother when they're done. So I'll just continue pressing these and then we'll do the next step. For this next step, I've put my unit on half square triangle onto a piece of sandpaper. I just use a very fine sandpaper on a clipboard. It keeps it so that the piece doesn't slip, so I can make a nice little line. And I'm going to draw, notice my seam line is running this way. I'm going to use my ruler here and draw a line down the middle, just like we did before. There's that one. I'll do this other one also. And it doesn't slip, and I wasn't holding it tight enough against the ruler, so it slipped a little bit, but no worries. Okay, so I've put my lines on the back of these, and now I'm going to take the other combination that I have of fabric and I'm going to put them together so that the seams, you know, will lock right together there, and then I have the darks on the opposite sides and the lights on opposite sides. And I've got my line already in place to go ahead and sew. So we're back at the sewing machine to sew our units together. If I point this seam towards my machine, then it will help to push it against the seam on the bottom there. So that's the direction I generally like to do it when I'm making these hourglass units. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to sew just like before, 1/4 inch from each side of the line we drew. You can also, if you're more comfortable, put a pin in to hold things in place, but I find that generally it just, as like I said, this seam just pushes right into that next seam and it works pretty well. And I'm going to go ahead and flip those around and continue sewing just like I did before. Okay, so I cut my pieces apart on the drawn line and went ahead and pressed them. And now I am ready to trim them, which is probably the trickiest part of this whole process. So what I need to do is, for this quilt I'm working on, I'm going to trim these to 3-inch squares. And so half of 3 is 1.5. So my 1.5 mark on my ruler, I'm lining up right at the intersection of those seams. And then I want the diagonal line of my ruler to go right along the seam that I've sewn, the diagonal seam there. So you just get those all kind of adjusted to where they're looking good. I basically view this as the little arrow that's pointing to the center. And so then I can trim off the first 2 sides. I felt it slip a little bit there, so I'm going to realign things here. There we go, and then rotate this around the other way, and again line up that diagonal line on my seam and the 1.5 inch mark at the center there, and then the 3-inch lines will be on the edges that I just trimmed. Once I have that looking good, then I'm ready to trim away. And there we have an hourglass block ready for a quilt.